Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today for this insightful panel discussion on a topic that holds immense significance in the ever-evolving landscape of the GCC retail industry. Retail resilience, charting a sustainable path. To set the stage, let's take a quick look at the GCC retail industry. The region has experienced remarkable growth over the last few decades, driven by economic diversification, a burgeoning middle class, and a thriving tourism sector. However, as with any industry, the retail landscape faces its own set of challenges, and the need for resilience has become paramount. In recent years, the GCC retail sector has encountered disruptions ranging from economic fluctuations to global pandemics, technological shifts, and changing consumer preferences. These challenges have underscored the importance of building resilience within the industry, the ability not only to withstand shocks, but to adapt, evolve, and thrive in the face of adversity. So what exactly do we mean by retail resilience? In the context of our discussion today, it refers to the industry's capacity to navigate uncertainties due to climate change, absorb shocks, and proactively respond to change while maintaining a focus on sustainable practices. Resilient retailers are those that can endure short-term challenges without compromising long-term goals. In an era where environmental, social, and governance considerations are at the forefront, sustainable practices are no longer just a preference, but a necessity. And the intersection of retail resilience and sustainability is where the GCC retail industry can carve a path for a more robust and responsible future. So how can retailers in the GCC adapt to rapidly changing market dynamics, emerging technologies, evolving consumer behavior, while staying true to sustainable practices? And given the global disruptions to supply chains, again due to climate pressures, what measures can retailers adopt to ensure the resilience and sustainability of their supply chains in the GCC? And how can retailers foster deeper connections with consumer by aligning their values with sustainable practices? And in the era of digital transformation, how can the adoption of innovative technologies enhance retail resilience and sustainability? So with us today, I'd like to welcome Ms. Seneca Cottom, Head of Sustainability at Al Shaya, Ms. Leticia Magente, Head of Sustainability at CSR Apparel Group, and Ms. Florence Bulte, Chief Sustainability Officer at Shalhoub. Thank you all for being with us today. We'll begin with question one. Ms. Florence, if you could give us some your perspective of what are the most significant challenges that GCC retailers face in implementing sustainable practices, and how can they be overcoming these challenges?
Thank you very much. So just as an introduction, Shalhoub Group is a distributor and retailer of luxury products and brands in the region. So we operate in 8 countries and we employ around 15,000 people. So to answer your question, I will mention the challenge and the opportunities at the same time. For us, and based on our experience, data, for example, access to data and data accuracy. So when you take the environmental pillar, for example, when we started our journey of decarbonization in 2014, the major obstacle was access to data. So to overcome this challenge, we built an internal software allowing us to have access to the data. 2021 moving forward, we were ready to pave the way to our net zero commitments. So we took our baseline in 2021. We calculated our 3 scopes of emissions. And again, scope 1 and 2 was completely covered. It was fine because we had this system in place. Scope 3, again, we are facing a difficulty when to access data, knowing the complexity of our supply chain. So actually at COP, we announced a supplier engagement program. We partnered with Schneider. To launch this program, we mapped out 100 of our biggest emitters, our suppliers, And we are going to support them with awareness education, but also getting the right technologies so that we can get the right data to support with our Scope 3. Then I would say the second point is obviously infrastructure and regulation. I won't spend much time on it because we're all aware of that, but for us as a distributor and retailer, access to EV vehicles, for example, vans, not like vehicles, but vans, which can do the hop delivery has been extremely challenging for us. So again, 2 days ago, I think we signed a pledge with WACA, UAE Alliance for Climate Action, so the 2.0 pledge, so hopefully this will accelerate the access to EV vehicles, and not only light, but trucks. Access to the grid for our retail stores. We have 750 retail stores. We would love to have an access to solar energy like it's feasible in Europe. And hopefully, so the regulations will keep on giving us access to this type of thing. Last but not least, I would say customer behavior. So again, we launched a circularity report yesterday. The e-commerce business stands at 11% in the GCC market, whereas it's at 36% globally, so we are well behind, as we were discussing. Why? I mean, in the GCC, the criteria to buy sustainable products come only at the 9th position, in luxury market. Again, why? Because the purchase power here is much higher, like the average spend per capita in the GCC when it comes to luxury products, it's at $570 whereas it's $300 in the States and $200 in Japan. And I would say 40% of the customer who says why they don't buying a sustainable product, it's a lack of choice. And they are right, and that's why we shouldn't all blame the customers. As retailers, we have also our shares of responsibility. So, and I will develop it later, but giving access, to developing some business model, circular business model like we've done with our level shoes concept. We noticed that 63% of our luxury customers in the UAE were ready to buy pre-loved. Hence, we developed with Level Shoes this online pre-loved concept, which is working really well because it was based also on customer demand. So, it's a give and take situation. Yes, we are behind when it comes to customer behavior, but it's also our responsibility as retailer to put in the market some business model who are catering for the needs.
Thank you. And yes, I think also I would say the consciousness of the consumer is quite important. The habits of GCC consumer are quite different. The newness is always emphasized here more than so. Yeah, I think it's a challenge to introduce the pre-loved concept, but obviously, just like any trend, people will take it up, provided that it has some cachet, so.
Sorry, just want to mention, we hope it's not a trend, we hope it's there to stay.
Yeah. So we'll go to the, for the next question, I'll ask each of the panelists, please, to address this. So in your experience, how have sustainable retail practices contributed to creating a more resilient business model in the GCC region, particularly in the face of environmental challenges? So if you would like to. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. There's a few aspects to that question. I think first the regulation aspect, to be ready, to be ahead of the game, and the regulation is changing all the time. So, if you want your business to be resilient and to be relevant, you need to always be on top of what's happening. And the regulations are coming our way because there are regulations that are way more advanced in Europe, for example, or in the US. They are coming our way. So you can already know what is coming. You don't know when it's going to come, but it's going to come soon because the UAE is moving very fast. So we have to stay, ahead of what's coming and making sure that we're ready. From a financial point of view, sustainability was very often seen as a cost center. But now, you know, mindsets are starting to shift, and we see that, you know, it also means saving. For example, you know, if you start tackling your energy consumption, and you see where your red flags are in your warehouse, your operations, and so on, then you can actually usually companies that help you go through energy saving, their business case is that they're going to make you save money. So for companies, you know, when you start putting a business case in front of sustainability, that's when it starts working. There's also, we see a lot, and it's part of a lot of discussions here, sustainable finance. So now, thanks to sustainable finance, we can finance, green projects, we can finance sustainable projects, but it also pushes companies, because they have access to these loans, at better cost, because they are operating in a better way. So it's really pushing companies to operate and to behave in towards strong KPIs that really puts pressure on the company in a good way, and that's all going to lead to being more resilient. From a company perspective as well, you have the brand reputation, and I remember once I mentioned that, and some people are like, you can't throw in brand reputation in sustainability. Well, it's important for a business, we can't forget that, we are in sustainability, but we work for businesses. And brand reputation is everything to a business, and it helps you to attract, especially, for our companies here, we are all, as Florence was saying, we have mixed business models, and we work with licenses, we have joint ventures, and so on and so forth. So attracting the proper brand is very important. Also, as Florence was mentioning, responding to the demand, and getting the right product for the consumer, and not being too late, in the game. And sustainability, and the current situation forces companies to innovate. They forces companies to innovate, to think differently, to think out of the box, to share knowledge through associations, as we were mentioning, and to be transparent. And this really makes you accountable. Like you have to do what you say you do once you're transparent and it's out there.
Yeah.
From the perspective of our Shire Group, I think what we've done to be more resilient is look at trash. And I think a lot of companies don't realize how much comes out of trash. You can generate income out of trash, and that ability to be circular makes us more resilient. We talk about regulation, and we see this regulation that's happening in the UAE, where there's the single-use ban. So we're looking at how do we use our waste to create the feedstock to generate more products that we can use and to keep that circularity going. Not only is it a cost savings, will it be a cost savings, it's also helping the planet, because we're keeping that plastic waste out of the waste stream, and we're gonna recycle it as much as possible through our products. So there's also an opportunity with waste that people often forget about.
Yeah, and if you could like to add your perspective.
Yeah, I think you covered it all, but just to give a bit of figures, I would say cost saving and efficiency. So for us, for example, we shifted to solar energy, which allowed us to reduce our electricity bill by 30%. Optimization of routes, with the software, which allowed us to reduce our fuel consumption by 25%. Rationalization of our packaging for our own concept, streamlining the procurement process, which allowed us to reduce our cost by 20%, and obviously you have the environmental impact. Water efficiency, getting to a BMS system, regulators, etc., which allowed us to reduce our water consumption by 20% every year. Paper, obviously, when installation of smart printers in all our operations reduced our consumption of paper by 50% in the last 3 years. Regulation, as you were mentioning, be prepared. You were mentioning the single-use plastic. We started in 2017, so which allowed us to spread out the cost, of doing it. And I would say. The last is trust and loyalty. So again, talent attraction, sustainability for young people especially is not negotiable anymore, and allowing us to be a partner of choice. So for us attracting the right brand. Like in our portfolio, for example, we have brands, we have collections which are sustainable, like L'Occitane with sustainable sourcing, etc. We have brands like Stella McCartney who are sustainable by design, Adolfo Dominguez also, for example. So being the partner of choice, you know, and being recognized for the sustainability involvement and strategy.
You know, and I would imagine as well, since most of you operate regionally, that there are some challenges as well with the different regulations in different countries that you have to take into account. But also, which takes us to our third question, which is how do we engage the consumers? So how can retailers effectively engage and educate consumers about the importance of sustainability in the retail sector, specifically in countries where maybe the regulations are lacking?
Yeah, there is a challenge with the consumer and their understanding of what sustainability is or what sustainable products are. So as retailers, it's our responsibility to teach them. And as Florence mentioned, it's our responsibility to offer them products and a choice. There was a study a couple of years ago by BCG that interviewed people from the GCC, locals from the GCC, and found that the consumer in the GCC understands what sustainability is. They know what it is, they understand the impact, but they just don't know what to do. And also in that study, they found that the consumer, if they had products that they could buy that could provide them with healthier food, healthier products, especially for their children, they would pay more for those things. So we need to make sure that we're giving them those options in store. And then we need to harness loyalty. It doesn't matter where you go. Everybody needs incentive to make a change, and sustainability requires a significant cultural change and a personal change for our consumers. So we need to be able to offer them something to incentivize them to make better choices. Our loyalty program is a good way to do that. We have our Aura loyalty program, and we do incentivize customers through our Body Shop store to bring back their packaging. And so we use the loyalty program to say, hey, if you bring back your packaging, we'll go and do the hard work for you. We'll go ahead and recycle it for you. But we're going to give you something in exchange for that. We're going to reward you for that effort. So it all boils down to providing options for our customers and providing those options at the right time, and then also allowing them or giving them something in return to help incentivize them to keep coming back to create those habits.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. As somebody who works in this sort of with civil society and with the consumers, we do hear this a lot from just families, mothers, whatever. You know, what are the choices? What is out there available? And there's a perception that it's always more expensive and harder to get to, which again takes us to our fourth question, which is, what are the collaborative efforts between retailers, governments, and NGOs that are essential for advancing sustainability in the retail sector?
So I think there's something that is very striking is that, when you look at the UN SDGs, there's UN SDG 17, which is not a sustainability goal per se, but it's been there to sustain, to support, because it's a prerequisite to reach all the other UN SDGs. And why we need collaboration, I mean, it's not a choice, we need it because we need, all the knowledge that we can gather. We need to work together, and actually it struck me when we're talking about what's coming out of COP, how many alliances have started at COP, how many MOUs have been signed, how many pledges have been signed. And that really shows that, we cannot work on our own, and the climate change is going to affect us all, not equally, but it's going to affect us all, and it's too big of an issue for us to work on, by ourselves. Then there's another aspect, is that the sustainability world, we've seen it has changed very fast. We went from a few years back, it was pure CSR, philanthropy, moving on to, calculating your scope 1, scope 2. Now, if you don't have calculated your scope 3, it's, and every time you have a discussion, you're like, I follow this framework. They're like, oh, you also follow this framework? Like, there's always something else. The bar is super high. So if you don't have that level of cooperation, it's very hard on your own to make big progress and fast, because we need them to happen fast. And also because we are not all at the same level, despite the urgency. Some organizations or companies have not started at all, and in order to I can only imagine how overwhelming it looks like, if you haven't started your journey. It's like, where do I start? So other companies and other organizations that have already started can really help these companies by knowledge sharing, best practices sharing, and so on and so forth. And to come back to the alliances, and we are members of several. UN Global Compact, the UACA, UAE Alliance for Climate Action, that are really here to help, bring organizations together to fast track our journeys. And it's important because, we are all here, we are all basically competitors, but this topic is beyond competition. We cannot, say, oh, we are competitors, let's not share. And I was struck by an example of a best practice that was shared during one of our UACA session. It was from a food delivery partner, and they shared how they've calculated all their scope. They shared their files, they shared everything. It's like, for someone who starts, it's like, here's the package, you have everything you need to start. And I thought that was absolutely brilliant, this level of transparency and cooperation between companies. I thought that was, exactly what we need is, to start is transparency, knowledge sharing, and so on. Then the last point I wanted to make on collaboration is we are very lucky to be in the UAE because the government truly listens to all its stakeholders. And it's something that, that is, we don't see in many countries out there where, you organize roundtables or discussions and what's coming out of these goes straight to the government. And I think that's absolutely fabulous because it's really going to fast track the journey of the country and the journey of the organizations.
Also, sorry, go ahead.
I don't think we think enough about our products, and we talk about partnerships with NGOs, but we also need to partner with NGOs because our products and our services and our employees are coming from so many diverse places that we're having impacts well beyond where our stores are. And so we also need to think about how do we interact with NGOs to support the communities in the places where our employees are, where our products are made, and things like that. Because sustainability isn't just here in the UAE, Carbon is everywhere, right? The emissions that we make here don't just impact us here, they impact the people in the US, in Nepal, they impact everywhere. So we also need to be cognizant that we need to work with these other organizations because we do also need to have an impact in the places where our products and our people are having impact.
And that's the S in ESG, which is quite important because at the end of the day, this is your supply chain, and the people at the other end tend to be, I think, in most cases, probably least represented in the big picture of any corporation. But it is quite important to highlight their role. And I also wanted to add that the collaboration obviously is clearly very important because, as you mentioned, the regulations coming, I think the new regulations will start to focus as well on biodiversity and nature. So we've got climate reporting, and in the next few years you'll have nature and biodiversity reporting, and that's a whole new Pandora's box. And I think this is where one sector probably is more advanced, and maybe like agriculture, food production, than other sector. And it's always good to get the lessons learned from the different sectors that are interacting mostly like with the land. Looking forward, looking towards the future. And this we're coming to our last question. What innovative strategies do you believe will shape the next phase of sustainability? in GCC retail? And this question is open to the whole panel.
I have the mic, so I'll start. I think there's a couple of things that are going to be important, especially in this region. I'm going to start with the easy one. AI is going to be,
Of course.
it's everything now. But I think where it's going to be more important specifically for us in retail is how do we look at our impacts, especially in carbon. We have lots of data. We've created a carbon dashboard ourselves internally to monitor our air freight and our sea freight. But how now, with AI, do we take all of that data and maximize, or let's rephrase, let's minimize our carbon footprint in our freight? How do we start thinking about how do we order better and using AI to order better? Because as we are ordering better, that means that the product is getting here just in time. We're not ordering too much product. We're not shipping too much product, which overall will reduce our footprint. So how do we use AI in every part of our business to reduce our impacts? And I think technology around circularity is going to be really important as we go forward. I mean, all of our organizations work in apparel, and new technologies are coming very quickly around recycled fabrics, new textiles that are made out of, regenerative fibers. So how do we, as businesses, how do we shape that? And how do we use more of that in the products that we are selling? And how will that impact the price of the products? Because right now, when we talk about those circular fabrics, they're very expensive right now. So how do we get those prices down so they're more accessible to consumers at every level? And then circularity around our packaging. So all of the technology around packaging and how do we reduce packaging first? And then the packaging that still exists, how do we make it in such a way that it's recyclable, reusable? And how do we make it more sustainable in terms of packaging? And there's lots of technology. I've talked to someone who makes packaging out of stone. There's loads of things out there. So how do we bring that to this part of the world so that we can use it?
To stay on the tech side or a little bit, I think traceability and transparency, because we always, there was this campaign of, you made my clothes or I made your clothes, and still, okay, it says, made in this country or that country, but there's not much beyond that, and people now really want to understand who made their clothes. There are a few scandals, every year on different parts of the world and on the raw materials and so on and so forth. So people really want to know what they're purchasing, and this will only come with a very stringent traceability that can be helped by blockchain, RFID, and all that. But once again, it adds up to the cost. So it's how do we do all that? And the consumer is still ready because they say they're ready, but they're not exactly ready to pay more. So it's for the companies to eat a bit of, of this margin maybe. And also we were suggesting in a roundtable recently to have an adaptation of taxes on so-called sustainability products, so that these products actually are not more expensive than the rest. So for me, that's going to be, and another trend, I think, but it's not necessarily related to sustainability, is what I was mentioning is mandatory reporting. We need mandatory reporting and integrated accounting. And once, GHG accounting is really linked to finance and accounting, it's going to make our lives much easier because, these difficulties that we are mentioning now are going to disappear. Every, dollar or dirham is going to be linked to a specific carbon, equivalent, and that would be absolutely amazing because it would make everything easier, faster, and and when we remove that hurdle, you can spend your time, instead of spending your time gathering the data, you can spend your time analyzing the data and taking action.
Thank you. So just not to repeat what has been said, I'd like to stay on the exploring the development of a circularity business model, again based on the report we issued yesterday. It's true that the region is a bit behind, but still, the global e-commerce is planned to reach $11 billion in 2026. Specifically for the luxury business, it's planned to reach 780 millions by 2026. I think it's now at 500 millions. So, I mean, there will be some opportunities. So again, if I'm focusing on the luxury business, we're seeing a huge trends in e-commerce when it comes to watch, jewelry, and bags. So these are the main point of focus, and especially as a group, we would like to focus on. Why is that? Because people are looking for uniqueness. They're looking for limited edition. They're looking for vintage product, affordability to a point, even investment potential in some of the products. It's interesting to see also that in the region, 70% of the people who bought pre-loved or resell pre-loved actually used the money to buy also. So you know that there's a dynamic coming out of it. So for us, it means that it's open door to a new revenue streams that can be extremely interesting. And again, to my first point, to our responsibility as a retailer to offer more choice, offer more, put out there more products for our customers. So yeah, I mean, I talked about the pre-loved business model that we have with Level Shoes. We've started a rental business model with Tanagra, so which is a home and decoration. So instead of buying dinnerware when you host a dinner, you can just rent the dinnerware. We've launched a very interesting concept also in France with one of our brands, Christophe, which is silverware, cutlery silverware. It's the vintage concept. And so we knew there was an appetite. Again, it has to be driven by the customers for sure. So there was an appetite for vintage products. So now what we are doing, we are buying out from a flea market silverware. We are refurbishing them in our factory in Yainville, and we're selling them under a vintage collection. And this is extremely successful. It started with a pop-up in Le Bon Marché in Paris, and now it's in several shops in Paris. It's online and everywhere. So, looking at based on the report, looking at the development potential of circular business model, whereas it's in re-commerce, repair, there's definitely an opportunity in that domain.
Thank you for that. And so this brings us to the end of our panel discussion. And just to summarize some of the main points you mentioned, sustainability is quite important for brand reputation. I think we can all agree on that. And you've all highlighted the importance of collaboration between governments, NGOs, and instead of being competitors, you can be collaborators. And for the future, I think AI and circularity are key. And I think what you mentioned, which personally is quite close to my heart, which is the pre-loved. On a personal level, this is something I appreciate, especially when you mentioned like the silverware and so on. It is also, I think, for a lot of us, it reminds us of our mothers and our grandmothers and so on. So it's almost like we're sort of reliving some of the kind of things that they appreciated as in the previously. So I'd like to thank you all for being here with us, and I'd like to thank the audience, and and hope wishing you all a success in your future endeavors. Thank you.